The Sherborne Cinema is a small independent cinema located in the centre of Gloucestershire. The cinema was originally built in 1880 and was used as a street mission room. Today the building stands as Sherborne Cinema, a retro-style cinema that acts as entertainment for many. For this documentary, we interviewed the owner of the cinema, Mark Cunningham, to find out why he got into the cinema business and how he is dealing with the current coronavirus pandemic.
My name is Mark Cunningham. I actually own the cinema, and technically I'm employed by the company which runs it because it's a limited company. So I sort of own it and I'm employed by it as well. I always loved cinema ever since I was, very, 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 very young. Because the first film I went to see was Mary Poppins, which is up in Birkenhead when we lived up there.
I was so frightened.
Bert will take care of you, like I was your own father.
And of course, when you're small, it always seems much bigger, you know. And I think that was sort of when I first got a love of it, and it didn't really seem like a very practical thing to do. And it wasn't until I was a lot older that I was actually able to have a go at it properly when I managed to buy the Palace at Cinderford in Cinderford at an auction sale. And that was my first cinema. That gave me a start to get me going, really. The small, independent, traditional cinema, I maintain, and obviously I'm biased, it is very much the traditional core of cinema going. It's about a film, you keep the prices reasonable. In the days of real poverty in the 20s and the 30s, people could go to the cinema and there was always a price which you could afford. People should be able to go to the cinema without thinking about the cost.
From listening to Mark, it was clear that his affordable prices and classical cinema style was something he prides himself on. But what do other people think about the Sherborne Cinema? We decided to interview a selection of people who have experience going to the Sherborne Cinema to find this out.
So my name is Toby Walton. I did work experience at Sherborne Cinema in January. It's very different to your average chain of cinemas such as Cineworld, as it's got this old-fashioned style decor. It feels very genuine, like he's doing it because he's got a love of film and he wants to just show people other movies. It's got its own feel to it, which the bigger chains just don't have. And you know every time you go in there you're going to see Mark most likely, and you can get to know him a bit more, and it just feels more safe. Yeah, the pricing's really good, and obviously for the confectionery and stuff, it's really good pricing, because when you go to the cinemas they always overcharge, but with Mark it's always £1 for a bag of sweets, which is that's just great. It's a cheap day out and you get really good value for what you get.
I'm Becky Richardson, and I've been to the Sherborne Cinema a few times to see a few films, mainly with my children. Well, for us, it's been brilliant to have the Sherborne locally. We've been able to go and see some films that haven't been able to be shown in mainstream cinemas. So we've been to see, for example, The Lighthouse and Bait, which are two films that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to see at the cinema. It's really good because not only do they show some independent films, actually they make the films really accessible, all films accessible to everyone. So quite a number of my friends take their children to see mainstream films as well at the Sherborne, because actually it's a really small, friendly cinema, a little bit cheaper than the big conglomerates. And actually, particularly for some friends whose children struggle with sensory issues, it's a really nice, quiet, calm, friendly environment that actually it's a really nice place to go. I think it's really important to have independent cinemas like the Sherborne, partly because it's a local business and it's really good to support local businesses, but partly because it's more accessible for all sorts of people to go to the cinema and see films of all types.
Now we have heard what inspired Mark to start the Sherborne Cinema and what makes the Sherborne unique from larger cinema chains, we then wanted to hear Mark's thoughts on the notion that in-person cinema is dying out due to the coronavirus and the rise in online streaming, with Netflix reaching 195 million registered subscribers as of the third quarter of 2020, according to Statista.com. So this is clearly an issue on a lot of people's minds. Let's now hear some of Mark's thoughts on the matter.
I'm fairly certain when the pandemic's over, there'll be a great desire for people to go out again. I mean, the key, perhaps, to understanding elements of the human condition are the desire for novelty and change and variety. and all human beings are driven by that, you know, and it's a force for good, it's a force for evil, because obviously it's what drove colonisation and all this wickedness which accompanied it. But it's just that desire to be in motion. It's like you build a motorway, and you say, well, that's going to solve a traffic problem, but it never does, because all that happens is if we can get to a garden centre 10 minutes quicker, we'll go to another garden centre. There's another stop at a motorway, because we've tried that one out. We've got a perfectly good garden centre here in Gloucester or wherever, but well, if I can get to Evesham or Worcester just as quickly, then I'll do that, because it's variety. There's a famous lady called Elsie Cohen who ran the first art house cinema in Britain, which was the Academy in Regent Street, and she said in an interview in the 60s or 70s, when cinema was really fading a little bit, she says people would always want to go out of the house to do interesting things out of a house, and I think that's the absolute core of it. And you know, there'll always be that desire. So even if you watch a film at home on Netflix or whatever, there's always different streaming services now, but you never experience that different feeling that you get when you go to a cinema. So yeah, I'm sure it'll come back. It did after 1918, you know, because there was a whole, you know, it was 4 years of the First World War. People didn't feel like going out, you know, especially women where husbands are away, so don't feel like it, not in the right mood for it. Then there was the flu pandemic. But after that was over, it just roared back.
Mark is clearly optimistic about the future of in-person cinema. One of the things he mentioned in his response was Elsie Cohen, who started the first art house cinema in the late 1920s. The cinema can actually be seen today under the name the Windmill International Theatre, which was originally just called the Windmill Theatre when it opened in 1931. We also asked our other interviewees whether they think in-person cinema is dying out. Here's what they said in response.
Maybe. Obviously, after lockdown ends, like, it's a good chance that a lot of people want to actually go outside for once. Like, I know it's into like a closed room, but it's actually more socialising with people. But I'm not sure how long that can last due to streaming services such as Disney Plus and Netflix.
Do I think in-person cinema is dying out? No, I don't think in-person cinema is dying out. I think very much the moment that we're able to open up society, I think it's going to take off again. It's a really good place to be.
To ensure the Sherborne Cinema can reopen safely once the coronavirus is over, Mark was given a government grant worth around £9,000. Let's end off by hearing what Mark is using the money he's been granted for, his opinion on the importance of film, and finally what he thinks the future of the cinema business will look like.
Well, we've sort of bitten a bullet. We've ordered a Vista Visi supplying us with, all thanks to the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, you know, so thanks to them, which we wouldn't have done otherwise, because I mean, this system of ventilation has cost around about £5,000. The PP and all the other equipment, fogging equipment and such like, it's cost about another £2,000, and the hardware for the ticketing is about another £2,000 again. So it has been a great help, and I think, you know, we've sort of got to move forward. We've got to say, well, obviously it could be quite a while when we're on restricted numbers, and people will want a book to come. But I think film is a really important part of our culture, and you know, it expresses a lot of things which, you know, you might not say, but you watch a film and you say, yeah, that is exactly how I feel about something, you know. You know, obviously there's people paint, people write books, but arguably cinema watching films is the most popular pastime of people over the whole world virtually now, and you know, it is a major art form. I mean, I've got friends, 2 or 3 of my friends don't watch films at all. And I said, well, films are just, you know, it's all fluff and Hollywood and stuff. I said, well, yeah, but there's so many interesting films. There's American independent films, there's British independent films, which aren't Hollywood films. And as a matter of fact, even Hollywood films can sometimes come out with something really amazing. I mean, take bereavement, it's a serious subject. You know, I used to show quite a few, I worked at the Guild, so I showed quite a few films about bereavement. Most of them just left me completely dry-eyed, and I thought, oh, well, must be something wrong with me now, you know. And then we showed A Monster Calls, which is by a Spanish director, absolutely searing film, and you know it put all that emotion in a very allegorical kind of way, but in a way which you could sort of totally connect with, and that's the power of film, and it's a good film. I mean, not all good films are good, but you know, but films are always entertaining, and I mean, I'll take Parasite, you know, the Korean film. I just went and watched that at the Guildhall. It's just an amazing film, and I feel I've met Mr. and Mrs. Park, you know, and that thing where you cross the line, and oh dear, I crossed the line now. Shouldn't have said that, because they're rich, you know, and they don't like that. They like to be treated with respect, you know. So perfect. So yeah, that's why film's important. I don't think in the long term streaming will hurt it that much. I mean, it may do for a while, but you see, the point is, historically, since the 1950s, there's been one new innovation after another. So first of all, you've got television, but you know, it's somebody sitting there in evening dress, looking very snooty. But then, you know, in the 60s, you've got BBC Two comes along, colour TV comes along, video comes along, and then DVDs, and then streaming. But every time, you know, cinema seems to just keep going, and it's all about a going out thing again.